The engine generator, fuel tank subbase, and acoustical enclosure will arrive on the job site by separate semi-trailer. There are a total of 3 semi-trailers per 2 megawatt assembly. Thus, 4 assemblies will require a staging area for 12 semi-trailers. Upon arrival, the mechanics should tighten all lifting eye bolts. Transportation may have loosened any one of these bolts, which are required to hold the 24-ton fuel tank during the lift. The tank will have several sections of pipe and fittings shipped loose. These pallets should be offloaded prior to lifting the fuel tank. This pallet of 6-inch pipe will be used as vent pipe on each fuel tank. The rigger can now attach the lifting sling with a clevis on each corner of the tank. A rope is attached to the corners to allow positioning the tank during the lift. We place spotters at the corners to provide exact placement on this chalk line footprint. After the fuel tank has been placed on the concrete generator pad, we can begin preparation for installing the engine generator on the tank subbase. Isolator springs have been factory installed on the fuel tank subbase. Each isolator spring assembly is provided with an engine skid mounting bolt attached with shipping tape. Here we remove the tape in preparation to receive the engine generator skid. The bolt is removed by cutting the tape from the isolator spring. The nut is removed from the bolt and the 3 washers, 1 steel and 2 fiber, are removed. The nut is then threaded onto the bolt, followed by the washers, as shown. Once this is completed, we will loosen the 2 isolator spring base mounting bolts to allow moving the isolator during bolt hole alignment. The weight of the engine generator set is not evenly distributed along the skid base. To compensate for this uneven weight distribution, the front to rear chain lengths from the spreader bar are positioned at different lengths. For the sagging end of the load, we will shorten the chain by as much as 18 inches to level the load during lifting. Note the spreader bar is positioned perpendicular to the load. The width of the chain fall connecting points on the spreader bar must not be greater than the width of the radiator. This will provide a stable load and unlikely to roll into the chains. The load must be level during the lift to allow setting it on the isolator springs. To provide much-needed stability during isolator spring alignment, the skid needs 1 bolt started first, followed by the other 9. Remember that the bolts have been prepared with the locking nut started first, followed next by the steel washer, and up front the 2 fiber washers. Once the full weight of the skid is on the isolator springs, we will tighten the mounting bolts until 3 bolt threads become visible as the bolt compresses the 2 springs. To secure the mounting bolt into this position, we will now tighten the locking nut onto the steel and fiber washers. The acoustical enclosure has lifting eyes at each corner, similar to the subbase fuel tank. A clevis is used to attach the lifting sling to each corner. Due to the enclosure having uneven weight distribution, the sling will also need to have one end shortened to pull up a sagging end. Ropes have once again been attached to provide stability and proper orientation during the lift. Our concern is for safety and to not damage the engine generator set during the setting of the enclosure over the assembly. As the enclosure is lowered, caution is needed to not damage the engine generator and fuel tank piping. The enclosure weight is nearly 10 tons and can cause severe damage if not properly controlled during the set. Preparation for the final set of the enclosure requires the installation of the rubber weather stripping along the perimeter of the fuel tank. The weather stripping has an adhesive side that is used to adhere to the fuel tank and the underside of the enclosure. The enclosure bolt holes are aligned to the fuel tank slotted holes for final bolting together. The exhaust manifold has two discharge pipes that may be routed into a single muffler inlet or dual muffler inlets. The muffler style to be used is dictated by allowable noise criteria for the installation location. Here we see the single inlet assembly. As we view the engine, notice that the first step is to assemble the two exhaust pipe elbows into the engine exhaust manifolds. The 3/4 inch assembly bolts are shipped attached to the manifold in plastic bags. Each elbow also has two sampling bungs that require a copper O-ring and a threaded stop to be assembled during the installation. Here we see a man on the enclosure roof guiding the Y-flex pipe through the roof opening. The Y-flex pipe may also be installed after the enclosure is set. This may be necessary due to staging constraints when setting up the crane for the unloading of equipment. 2 men will be needed inside the enclosure to manipulate the Y-flex pipe into position on the exhaust elbows. A green gasket is used to seal each exhaust flange joint. The GT series muffler is shipped to the site skid mounted. The muffler mounting straps are held to the muffler with shipping straps. The roof mounting channels, painted ANSI 61 gray, are also shipped attached to a skid. The exhaust extension pipe shown here will be mounted on the muffler prior to lifting. Rain caps will be fastened to the muffler exhaust discharge openings. The muffler flanges will be sealed with the green high-temperature gaskets. Following the green gasket, we assemble a stainless steel roof cap, another green gasket, and the exhaust pipe extension. This subassembly will require 16 1-inch bolts, packaged 4 per plastic bag. Following the exhaust pipe extension assembly, we attach the mounting straps toward the outer ends of the muffler. These straps are split in halves and connected by 3/4 inch bolts, as shown. Once the straps have been bolted together, the mounting feet are visually checked to be flush with the stainless steel roof cap. The muffler assembly is rolled forward to position the exhaust discharge tip for assembly of the rain cap. This is also the proper orientation for the lift. Channels are first lifted to the roof for assembly. The channels are not bolted to the roof. They are only bolted to the muffler. The muffler is lifted to the roof, and the exhaust tip is positioned to discharge away from the cooling air inlet on the enclosure. Mufflers are secured to the rails in 4 locations, but the rails are not bolted to the roof. A mechanic is positioned inside the enclosure to align the bolt holes of the exhaust pipe, the green gasket, and the floating flange on the Y-flex pipe. Use of a C-clamp will assist in this endeavor. This final view shows the mufflers setting on the enclosure roofs. Tighten all lifting eye bolts. Use ropes attached to the load to stabilize and orient during positioning. Mark the footprint on the concrete pad for accurate setting. Prepare isolator springs for skid alignment by loosening mounting bolts. Prepare the mounting bolts for insertion through the skid bolt holes. Give attention to proper spreader bar width to stop the load from rolling. Remember to tighten the isolator skid bolt to a depth of 3 threads. Stabilize loads with ropes attached to each corner, controlled by the rigger. The muffler is assembled prior to the lifting onto the enclosure roof. Mufflers are secured to the rails in 4 locations, but the rails are not bolted to the roof.